The fluorescent lights of Rosie's diner buzzed softly as Jennifer wiped down the counter for what felt like the 100th time that evening. Her feet ached in her worn-out sneakers, and she could feel every hour of the double shift weighing on her shoulders. It was one of those cold November nights where the wind cut right through your jacket, and all you wanted was to be home under a warm blanket. But home would have to wait. Jennifer needed every dollar she could earn. Between raising 2 kids on her own and trying to keep up with bills that never seemed to stop coming, there was no such thing as calling it quits early. She glanced at the clock on the wall. Just 2 more hours until closing time. The dinner rush had finally died down, leaving only a handful of customers scattered across the red vinyl booths. That's when she noticed him. An older man had quietly slipped into the corner booth near the back, almost as if he was trying to make himself invisible. His clothes told a story that broke her heart. A faded military jacket that had seen better days, pants that were torn at the knees, and boots held together with what looked like duct tape. Jennifer grabbed a menu and a glass of water, making her way over to his table. As she got closer, she could see his hands resting on the table, weathered and rough with dirt under the fingernails. He was counting change. Pennies, nickels, dimes, all spread out in front of him like a puzzle he was trying to solve. She noticed how carefully he stacked each coin, his fingers trembling slightly. Whether from the cold or something else, she couldn't tell. "Good evening, sir," she said gently, placing the water in front of him. "Can I get you something to eat tonight?" The man looked up at her, and for a moment their eyes met. His eyes were a pale blue, the kind that must have been striking once, but now they carried a weight that seemed almost too heavy to bear. There was something in his gaze, though, dignity, pride, something that hadn't been completely worn away by whatever circumstances had brought him here. "Just the water is fine." "Ma'am," he said quietly, his voice hoarse. "Thank you for that. I'm sorry for taking up a seat. I'll just warm up for a few minutes and be on my way." Jennifer's heart sank. She looked down at the coins on the table. Maybe $1.50, $2 at most. Definitely not enough for a meal. She opened her mouth to speak, but he continued. "I appreciate your kindness, really. Not everyone lets folks like me sit down these days." He started gathering his change as if preparing to leave. That's when Jennifer noticed the patch on his jacket. U.S. Army. It was faded, the stitching coming loose in places, but it was unmistakable. Her father had worn one just like it. Her dad had served 2 tours overseas before coming home and building the quiet life he'd always wanted. He'd passed away 3 years ago, and not a day went by that she didn't miss him. Something shifted in her chest. This wasn't just some stranger. This was someone who had served, who had stood up when his country called. And now he was sitting in her diner, cold and hungry, counting pennies and apologizing for existing. "Sir," she said, her voice firmer now, "when's the last time you had a hot meal?" The man hesitated, his hand stilling over the coins. "It's been a while, ma'am. But I'm all right. Don't you worry about me." Jennifer shook her head. "Well, I'm worrying anyway. And you know what? It just so happens that the kitchen made too much meatloaf tonight. It's just going to go to waste if someone doesn't eat it. Would you be willing to help us out with that?" The man's eyes widened slightly. "Ma'am, I can't, please," Jennifer interrupted, and this time there was something almost pleading in her voice. "My father served. Army, just like you. He always told me that we take care of our own. So let me do this. Not because you need charity, but because it's the right thing to do. Because you earned it a long time ago." For a moment the man just stared at her. Then slowly his eyes began to glisten with tears he was clearly trying to hold back. He nodded, unable to speak, and Jennifer squeezed his shoulder gently before heading back to the kitchen. "Hey, Tony," she called out to the cook. "I need the meatloaf special, extra gravy, mashed potatoes, green beans, and a slice of apple pie. And make it good." Tony looked up from the grill, about to say something, when he caught the expression on her face. He'd worked with Jennifer long enough to know that look. "You got it," he said simply. Jennifer rang up the order on her own tab. $18.50. That was half of what she'd made in tips tonight, money she'd been counting on for groceries. But somehow it didn't matter. Some things were more important than numbers in a bank account. While the food cooked, she grabbed a fresh coffee pot and returned to the man's table. "Coffee while you wait?" she asked. "That would be wonderful, thank you." His voice was steadier now, though still quiet. As she poured, she noticed other details. His hair was long and gray, tied back in a ponytail that had probably been neater at some point. There was a small tear in his jacket sleeve, carefully sewn up with mismatched thread. Someone at some point had cared enough to make that repair, or maybe he'd done it himself. "I'm Jennifer, by the way," she said. "Robert," he replied, wrapping his hands around the warm coffee cup like it was something precious. "Robert Hayes. Nice to meet you, Robert. Where did you serve?"
"Vietnam," he said, and there was a long pause.
"Long time ago now. Feels like another lifetime." Jennifer wanted to ask more, but something told her not to push. The way his eyes had gone distant told her that those memories weren't easy ones. Instead, she just nodded. "Thank you for your service." Robert looked at her with an expression that was hard to read. "Thank you for treating me like a person. You'd be surprised how many people look right through you when you're on the streets. Like you're invisible. Or worse, like you're dangerous." Before Jennifer could respond, Tony rang the bell. "Order up!" She brought out the plate, and it was loaded. Tony had given Robert extra everything, a mountain of mashed potatoes, gravy spilling over the sides, thick slices of meatloaf, and the vegetables steaming hot. The slice of apple pie sat on a separate plate, topped with a generous scoop of vanilla ice cream. Robert stared at the food like he couldn't quite believe it was real. His hand shook as he picked up the fork. "Take your time," Jennifer said softly. "There's no rush." As he took the first bite, she saw a tear roll down his cheek. He tried to wipe it away quickly, but more followed. He wasn't sobbing or making a scene. The tears just fell silently as he ate, each bite seeming to carry more weight than just physical nourishment. Jennifer busied herself with other tables, but she kept glancing over to make sure he was okay. She watched as he ate slowly, savoring every single bite, the way someone does when they don't know where their next meal is coming from. Other customers noticed too, and she saw more than one person watching with soft expressions. When Robert finally finished, he'd cleaned every last bit of food from his plate. He sat back looking more at peace than he had when he'd walked in. Jennifer came over to clear the dishes. "Ma'am, Jennifer," he corrected himself, "I don't have words for what you've done for me tonight. This wasn't just about food. You gave me back something I thought I'd lost. You reminded me that I still matter, that I'm still human." He reached across the table and took her hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "God bless you. You'll never know what this means to me, what it really means." Jennifer felt her own throat tighten with emotion. "You take care of yourself, Robert. And you come back anytime, okay? You're always welcome here." He nodded, stood up slowly, and made his way to the door. Before leaving, he turned back one more time, gave a small nod that was almost military in its precision, and then disappeared into the cold November night. Jennifer cleared his table and found that he'd left his coins there, carefully stacked. All of them. It was his way of trying to pay even though she'd never asked. She picked them up and put them in her apron pocket, her eyes stinging with tears. She had no idea that in less than 12 hours, her entire life was about to change. That simple act of kindness, that one meal, was about to set off a chain of events that would make national news and remind an entire community what it means to truly honor those who serve. All she knew in that moment was that she'd done the right thing. And sometimes that's enough. Jennifer's alarm went off at 5:30 in the morning, just like it did every day. She groaned and reached over to silence it, her body protesting every movement. The double shift from the night before had left her completely drained, and she'd only gotten about 4 hours of sleep. But bills didn't pay themselves, and her kids needed breakfast before school. She dragged herself out of bed and went through the motions. Shower, coffee, getting the kids up and ready. Her daughter Katie was 8, and always moved at the speed of a sleepy turtle in the mornings. Her son Mike was 10 and somehow had endless energy even at 6 in the morning. They were her whole world even when exhaustion made her want to crawl back under the covers. "Mom, can we have pancakes?" Mike asked hopefully as she poured cereal into 2 bowls. "Maybe this weekend, buddy," she said, ruffling his hair. "Right now we need to get you 2 fed and off to school. And I need to get to work." The truth was, she was worried about money. Again. The rent was due in 5 days, and she was still short by 200 none. Oh, Lars. That $18.50 she'd spent on Robert's meal last night. She didn't regret it, not for a second, but it did mean she'd have to figure out where to squeeze a few more dollars from somewhere. Maybe she could pick up another shift this weekend. After dropping the kids at school, Jennifer drove to Rosie's diner. The morning sun was just starting to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. It was going to be a cold day. She could see her breath in the air as she got out of her car. The diner's parking lot was empty except for Tony's beat-up pickup truck. He always got there before everyone else to start prepping for the breakfast crowd. Jennifer grabbed her purse and started walking toward the entrance, her mind already running through everything she needed to do before opening. That's when she heard it. A low rumbling sound like distant thunder, but the sky was clear. She stopped walking and turned around, trying to figure out where the noise was coming from. It was getting louder, closer. Then she saw them. Coming down Main Street was a convoy of military vehicles. Not just one or two, it looked like at least a dozen. Humvees, big transport trucks with canvas covers, black SUVs with official-looking government plates. They moved in perfect formation, their engines creating a symphony of power that echoed off the buildings. Jennifer stood frozen in the parking lot, watching in complete disbelief as the entire convoy began pulling into Rosie's diner. One by one, the vehicles turned into the lot, their massive tires crunching on the gravel. They positioned themselves with military precision, creating neat rows that took up every available space and spilled out onto the street. What in the world? Jennifer whispered to herself. The door to the diner flew open and Tony came running out, his white apron still covered in flour from making biscuits. "Jennifer, are you seeing this? What's going on?" "I have no idea," she said, her heart starting to pound in her chest. By now, doors were opening on the vehicles and soldiers were stepping out. Real soldiers in full uniform, their boots hitting the pavement in sync. There had to be at least 30 of them, maybe more. Some were in camouflage, others in dress uniforms with medals gleaming on their chests. Jennifer's mind raced. Had something happened? Was there some kind of emergency? Her thoughts immediately went to Robert. Had something happened to him? Was he okay? Maybe he'd gotten into some kind of trouble and somehow she was involved because she'd helped him. People were starting to come out of the nearby shops and houses, drawn by the unusual sight. Mrs. Patterson from the bakery next door stood on the sidewalk with her hand over her mouth. A couple of teenagers across the street had their phones out, filming the whole thing. Jennifer's manager, Carol, arrived for her shift and had to park 2 blocks away because of all the military vehicles. She came speed-walking up to Jennifer, her eyes wide. What is happening? Did someone call the military? Is this some kind of inspection? I don't know, I just got here, Jennifer said, her voice shaking slightly. A tall officer stepped forward from the group. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with silver hair and a chest full of medals and ribbons that Jennifer couldn't even begin to identify. Everything about him commanded respect. The way he walked, the way he carried himself, even the expression on his face was pure authority mixed with something else. Something that looked almost like emotion. He walked straight toward Jennifer. "Ma'am, are you Jennifer Chen?" His voice was formal but not unkind. Jennifer's mouth went dry. How did he know her name? "Yes, that's me," she managed to say. "Ma'am, I'm Colonel James Peterson, United States Army. Is there somewhere private we could speak for a few minutes?" Jennifer looked at Carol, who nodded quickly, still looking completely bewildered. "Use my office," Carol said. Jennifer led the colonel through the diner, acutely aware that every eye, from the soldiers outside to Tony behind the counter, was watching them. Her hands trembled as she unlocked Carol's small office in the back. It was barely big enough for a desk, a filing cabinet, and 2 chairs, and suddenly felt even smaller with the colonel's commanding presence filling the space. "Please, have a seat," the colonel said, gesturing to the chair behind the desk. It was odd being invited to sit in an office where she worked, but she did it anyway. Her legs felt like jelly. The colonel sat across from her, and for a moment he just looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Then he spoke. "Mrs. Chen, do you remember serving a veteran named Robert Hayes last night?" Jennifer's heart skipped a beat. "Yes, of course. Is he all right? Did something happen to him?" "He's alive," the colonel said, "but just barely. Last night, after leaving your diner, Robert collapsed about 3 blocks from here. A police officer found him and called an ambulance. He was severely malnourished and dehydrated. The doctors at the VA hospital said if he'd gone another day or 2 without food, we might have lost him." Jennifer's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God. Mrs. Chen, Robert Hayes isn't just any veteran. He's a Medal of Honor recipient." "Do you know what that means?" She shook her head, unable to speak. "It's the highest military decoration our country can award. Robert received it for his actions during the Vietnam War." He saved 17 men from his unit during an ambush, despite being wounded himself. He carried 5 of them out of enemy fire on his back. He's a genuine American hero. Tears started forming in Jennifer's eyes. That kind, quiet man who'd apologized for taking up space in her diner was a hero. The colonel continued, his own voice growing thicker with emotion. After the war, Robert came home to a country that didn't always treat its veterans well. He struggled with what we now call PTSD. Lost his wife 10 years ago to cancer, couldn't afford the house on his pension, and ended up on the streets. He was too proud to ask for help, too broken to know where to start. I had no idea, Jennifer whispered. Last night, while the doctors were treating him, Robert told everyone who would listen about the kind waitress who treated him like a human being, who didn't look through him or turn him away, who bought him a meal even though he could tell she didn't have much herself. The colonel leaned forward. Mrs. Chen, do you know what you gave him? You gave him more than food. You gave him dignity. You reminded him that his service, his sacrifice still mattered to someone. Jennifer wiped at her eyes, overwhelmed. I just did what anyone should do. My father was a veteran. I couldn't just let him go hungry. That's where you're wrong, the colonel said gently. Most people don't do what you did. Most people look the other way, but you didn't. And when word reached our base commander about what happened, about Robert's condition and about the civilian who showed him kindness when he had nothing, something extraordinary happened. He stood up and walked to the small window that looked out over the parking lot. Mrs. Chen, the military takes care of its own. But we also honor those who honor us. What you're about to see out there is something that doesn't happen very often. Jennifer stood on shaky legs. I don't understand. You will, the colonel said with a slight smile. Come with me. As they walked back through the diner, Jennifer noticed that more people had gathered. The breakfast regulars who'd just arrived stood inside, peering out the windows. The sidewalk across the street was filling with townspeople, all trying to figure out what was happening. The colonel held the door open for her, and as Jennifer stepped outside into the cold morning air, she saw that all the soldiers had formed ranks. They stood at attention in perfect lines, faces forward, completely still. And in the center of it all, being carefully helped out of an ambulance she hadn't even noticed arrive, was Robert Hayes. He was wearing a hospital gown under a military blanket, an oxygen tube in his nose, but someone had helped him put on a clean version of his old army jacket. Even weak and frail, there was something different about him now. He wasn't the broken, apologetic man from last night. He was standing as straight as his condition allowed, and there was something in his eyes, pride maybe, or purpose. The colonel walked to the center of the formation and raised his voice so everyone could hear. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here this morning to honor 2 people. First, Sergeant Robert Hayes, a true American hero who has fallen on hard times but never lost his honor. And second, Jennifer Chen, a civilian who embodies the values that make our country great: compassion, generosity, and the willingness to stand up for those who've stood up for us. Jennifer's vision blurred with tears as the full weight of what was happening began to sink in. This wasn't just about a meal. This was about something much bigger. The colonel continued, what happens next proves that kindness isn't just a nice gesture. It's a force that can change lives, inspire communities, and remind us all of who we're supposed to be. As he spoke, Jennifer noticed news vans pulling up, cameras pointing in their direction. Local reporters, phones everywhere. People streaming out of nearby buildings. Her small act of kindness in a quiet diner was about to become something she never could have imagined. And standing there, wrapped in that blanket with tears streaming down his weathered face, Robert Hayes looked at her with an expression of gratitude so profound it took her breath away. Jennifer stood there in the parking lot, completely overwhelmed, watching as Colonel Peterson pulled out a small wooden box from his uniform. The morning sun caught the polished surface, making it gleam. Everything felt surreal, like she was watching a movie instead of living her actual life. Mrs. Chen, the colonel said loudly enough for the growing crowd to hear, on behalf of the United States military and a grateful nation, we want to present you with a civilian commendation for outstanding service and compassion. This award is rarely given, and only to those civilians who demonstrate extraordinary kindness toward our service members. Jennifer's hands shook as he opened the box to reveal a medal on a blue ribbon. It wasn't huge or flashy, but something about it felt important, heavy with meaning. I didn't do anything special. she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I just bought someone dinner. That's exactly what makes it special, the colonel replied, pinning the medal to her uniform. You didn't do it for recognition. You did it because it was right. The soldiers all saluted in unison, a crisp movement that made a sound like a single snap. Jennifer didn't know what to do, so she just stood there with tears running down her face. This wasn't what she'd expected when she woke up this morning, but then something else started happening. Something nobody had planned. A man emerged from the crowd of onlookers. Jennifer recognized him, Mr. Patterson, who owned the hardware store 2 blocks down. He was in his 60s, always wore suspenders, and had a voice that could boom across a room. Hold on just a minute, Mr. Patterson called out, walking straight into the middle of the ceremony. Colonel, I appreciate what you're doing here, and it's about time someone recognized Robert for his service. But there's something else everyone should know. He turned to face Jennifer directly. This young lady right here has been struggling for 3 years to keep her head above water. Single mom, 2 kids, working herself half to death at this diner. I see her car barely making it down the street every day. Last month she came into my shop asking if I knew anyone who could fix her transmission cheap because she couldn't afford a real mechanic. Jennifer felt her face flush with embarrassment. She didn't want anyone knowing how hard things were. She'd always tried to keep her problems private, to maintain some dignity even when everything felt like it was falling apart. But Mr. Patterson wasn't done. And despite all that, despite barely having enough for herself, she spent her own money to feed a stranger. That tells you everything you need to know about her character. A woman stepped forward from the crowd. It was Mrs. Wilson, Jennifer's landlord. She was a stern woman in her 70s, who Jennifer had been dreading talking to about the late rent. Jennifer's stomach dropped. Oh no, she thought. Please don't bring up the rent in front of all these people. But Mrs. Wilson surprised her. Jennifer Chen has never once complained, never once asked for special treatment. She's paid her rent on time for 3 years, even though I know for a fact she's had to skip meals to do it. The old woman's voice cracked slightly. After hearing what she did last night, I'm ashamed I never thought to help her myself. Mrs. Wilson pulled an envelope from her purse and walked over to Jennifer. This is the deed to your apartment. I'm signing it over to you. No more rent. That place is yours, free and clear. Jennifer's knees actually buckled. Carol, who'd been standing nearby, caught her arm to steady her. What? Mrs. Wilson, I can't. That's too much. Yes, you can, and yes, you will, Mrs. Wilson said firmly, pressing the envelope into Jennifer's hands. Consider it 3 years overdue. The crowd erupted in applause. People were wiping their eyes, and Jennifer couldn't process what was happening. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her, but it wasn't over. A younger man stepped forward, someone Jennifer didn't recognize. He was wearing a nice suit and carrying a briefcase. Mrs. Chen, my name is David Rodriguez. I'm a lawyer here in town. I've been following this story since I got a call from the base commander an hour ago. He opened his briefcase and pulled out some papers. The local business association took an emergency vote this morning. We want to establish a trust fund for your children's education. We've already collected $43,000 and more is coming in. Jennifer couldn't speak. She literally could not form words. $43,000? For her kids' college? Katie and Mike could actually go to college now? They wouldn't have to struggle the way she had. Tony came running out of the diner, his apron flapping. Jennifer, the phone hasn't stopped ringing. News stations, people wanting to donate, someone from the governor's office. He looked completely flustered. There's a guy on the phone right now from some morning show in New York who wants you to come on TV. Carol stepped forward and put her arm around Jennifer's shoulders. There's more, she said gently. The owner of the diner called me 10 minutes ago. He's been watching all this happen on the news. Yes, we're already on the news. And he told me to tell you that you're being promoted to general manager. Salary, benefits, the whole package. No more living on tips. Jennifer finally broke down completely. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed, not caring that there were cameras pointing at her, not caring that half the town was watching. It was too much. All of it was too much. Yesterday she'd been worried about being $200 short on rent, and now people were giving her a house, money for her kids, and a real job with real pay. She felt a hand on her shoulder and looked up to see Robert standing there. Someone had helped him walk over, his IV pole dragging beside him. He was crying too, his weathered face wet with tears. You saved my life, he said, his voice rough with emotion. But you also gave me something more important. You gave me hope. You reminded me that there are still good people in this world. Jennifer hugged him, careful not to disturb his oxygen line. You saved 17 men, she said through her tears. 17 families got their sons and fathers back because of you. What I did was nothing compared to that. No, Robert said firmly. What you did was everything. Those men I saved, that was war. That was my job. But you didn't have to help me. Nobody was making you. You did it because of who you are. The colonel cleared his throat and everyone turned to look at him. There's one more thing, he said. Sergeant Hayes will be receiving full veteran benefits and housing at the VA facility. He'll have round-the-clock medical care, counseling, everything he needs. And I've been authorized to tell you that his Medal of Honor pension, which he never properly claimed, will be backdated. He's looking at a substantial payment. Robert's eyes widened. I thought I'd lost the right to that years ago. You never lose the right to what you've earned, the colonel said. We failed you, Robert. The system failed you. But that changes today. More people kept coming forward. The owner of the gas station said he'd provide free oil changes for Jennifer's car. The grocery store manager offered a monthly credit. Parents from her kids' school promised childcare help. It was like the entire town had suddenly woken up and decided to take care of their own. A reporter managed to push through the crowd, her cameraman right behind her. Mrs. Chen. Mrs. Chen, how do you feel right now? What do you want to say to people watching? Jennifer wiped her face, trying to pull herself together. She looked at the camera, then at Robert, then at all the people who'd just changed her life in a single morning. I just want to say that I didn't do anything heroic. I saw someone who needed help and I helped. That's it. That's all any of us should do. She took a shaky breath. But what happened here today? This shows me that kindness isn't just about one person helping another. It's contagious. When you do something good, it spreads. It multiplies. And suddenly everyone wants to be part of making things better. She looked directly at Robert. This man right here is the real hero. He fought for our country. He saved lives. He deserves everything he's getting and more. All I did was buy him dinner. You did more than that, an older veteran in the crowd called out. He was wearing a Vietnam War cap. You showed him respect. You saw him as a person. A lot of us came home from war and got spit on, called names, treated like we were less than human. What you did matters more than you know. Other veterans in the crowd nodded, some of them wiping their own eyes. Jennifer realized this wasn't just about Robert anymore. This was about every veteran who'd ever felt forgotten, every person who'd ever struggled alone, every act of kindness that went unnoticed. The ceremony continued for another hour. More speeches, more donations, more people sharing stories. The diner staff brought out coffee and pastries for everyone. News crews multiplied. By noon, the street was so packed with people that the police had to come direct traffic. Through it all, Jennifer kept looking at Robert, and he kept looking at her. Two people who'd been struggling in their own ways, both feeling invisible and forgotten, now standing in the center of something bigger than either of them had imagined possible. As the crowd finally started to disperse and the reality of everything began to sink in, Jennifer realized something profound. She'd spent 3 years feeling like she was drowning, like no matter how hard she worked or how much she sacrificed, she'd never get ahead. She'd felt invisible too in her own way. But maybe nobody is really invisible. Maybe kindness is just waiting for someone to light the first match. And once that match is lit, the fire spreads in ways you can't predict or control. She thought about her kids, about the college fund they now had. She thought about not having to worry about rent anymore, about having a real job with benefits. She thought about Robert, who'd have a warm bed and medical care and the recognition he'd deserved for 50 years, and she thought about how all of it started with an $18 meal and the simple decision to treat another human being with dignity. Sometimes, Jennifer realized, the smallest acts create the biggest waves. 3 weeks had passed since that incredible morning in the parking lot, and Jennifer still couldn't quite believe it was real. Every morning she woke up expecting it all to have been a dream. But then she'd look at the medal hanging on her bedroom wall, or check her bank account and see actual money there for the first time in years, and reality would sink in again. Her life had changed in ways she was still trying to process. The promotion to manager meant she actually had a schedule now, regular hours, and for the first time since her ex-husband left, she could pick her kids up from school herself. No more relying on neighbors or after-school programs that cost money she didn't have. But the biggest change wasn't the money or the job. It was what happened every Tuesday and Thursday evening. Jennifer pulled into the parking lot of the Veterans Affairs facility, the same building where Robert was now living. She'd started visiting him the week after the ceremony, and what began as a simple check-in had turned into something neither of them expected, a real friendship. She grabbed the bag of cookies Katie had insisted on baking for Mr. Robert and headed inside. The receptionist, a kind woman named Linda, smiled when she saw her. "He's been waiting for you." "Been sitting by the window for the past hour." Jennifer found Robert in the common room and her heart lifted at the sight of him. The transformation over 3 weeks had been remarkable. He'd gained weight, not a lot, but enough that his face didn't look so hollow anymore. His hair had been cut and was neatly combed. He was wearing clean clothes, regular civilian clothes that actually fit him, but the biggest change was in his eyes. That haunted, defeated look was gone. "Jennifer!" He stood up, moving slowly but steadily. "No more oxygen tube. No more trembling hands." "And did Katie make her famous chocolate chip cookies again?" "She made me promise to tell you she added extra chocolate chips just for you," Jennifer said, handing him the bag. "Mike wanted to come, but he has soccer practice tonight. He says hi, though, and he wants to know if you'll come to his game on Saturday." Robert's eyes got misty. They did that a lot these days. "I wouldn't miss it for the world. You tell that boy I expect to see at least one goal." They sat together in the comfortable chairs by the window, watching the sun start to set. It was peaceful here. Clean, warm, safe. Everything Robert had been missing for so long. "How are the counseling sessions going?" Jennifer asked gently. She knew from the staff that Robert had been working with a therapist specializing in PTSD. Robert was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "It's hard, talking about things I've kept buried for 50 years. But it's good hard, you know? Like exercise that hurts but makes you stronger." He looked at her. "Dr. Morrison says I'm making real progress. Says I'm actually dealing with things instead of just surviving." Jennifer squeezed his hand. Over the past 3 weeks, she'd learned pieces of his story. About the war, about watching friends die, about coming home to a country that didn't want to acknowledge what he'd been through, about his wife, Margaret, who'd stood by him through everything until cancer took her, about how losing her had broken something in him that he didn't think could be fixed. "Margaret would have liked you," Robert said suddenly. "She had the same kind of heart you do, always bringing home strays. Cats, dogs, one time a guy who'd lost his job. She never could stand seeing someone in need without trying to help." "She sounds wonderful," Jennifer said. She was. 23 years we had together. "Not nearly long enough," he smiled sadly. "But you know what she used to tell me?" She'd say, "Robert, the world keeps going even after your heart breaks. And sometimes if you're really lucky, you find new people to love." I didn't believe her. After she died, I thought I was done, that there wasn't any point to any of it anymore. He looked directly at Jennifer. "But then I met you, and your kids. And all these people here who actually care whether I wake up in the morning. And I realized Margaret was right. The heart can expand. There's always room for more people in it." Jennifer felt tears stinging her eyes. "You've become family to us, too. Katie drew you a picture yesterday. It's in my car. I forgot to bring it in. She drew our family, and you're in it, standing right next to her and Mike." Robert had to wipe his eyes. "That might be the best thing anyone's ever given me." A young veteran walked by, probably in his 30s, missing his left leg below the knee. He was on crutches, and he nodded to Robert as he passed. "Evening, Sergeant Hayes." "Evening, Danny. How's the physical therapy going?" "Kicking my butt, sir. But I'll get there." After Danny left, Robert explained, "He's from Afghanistan. IED took his leg 2 years ago. Been struggling with depression since, but we talk sometimes. I think it helps him to see that you can come back from dark places, even if it takes a while." Jennifer realized then what else had changed about Robert. He had purpose again. He was helping other veterans who were struggling, just by being there, by being proof that recovery was possible. "Speaking of which," Robert said, reaching into his pocket, "I wanted to talk to you about something. Been thinking about it for days." He pulled out a folded newspaper clipping. Jennifer took it and saw it was a story about her and Robert. The headline read, "One meal, 1,000 ripples. How kindness changed a town." The article detailed everything that had happened, all the donations, all the people who'd come forward to help. I've been getting letters, Robert said quietly. Dozens of them. From veterans all over the country who saw this story. Some of them are struggling like I was. Some of them are doing okay but wanted to reach out. And it got me thinking, what if this didn't have to be a one-time thing? What if we could actually do something with all this attention? Jennifer leaned forward, intrigued. What do you mean? I mean, what if we started something? A program or an organization or whatever you call it. Something that connects struggling veterans with people in their communities who want to help. And maybe also helps the helpers, the people like you who are working so hard but could use some support themselves. He spoke faster now, more animated than Jennifer had ever seen him. See, the thing is, there are a lot of folks like me out there. Veterans who fell through the cracks, who are too proud to ask for help or don't know where to go. And there are also a lot of people like you. Single parents, people working multiple jobs, folks who are barely hanging on but still have good hearts. What if we could connect them? Build a network of support that goes both ways? Jennifer's mind started racing. Like a community support system. For veterans and for struggling families, exactly. We could start right here in this town, see if it works, and then maybe expand. The VA has some funding they could direct toward it. And with all the publicity from what happened, I bet we could get donations. Robert's enthusiasm was infectious. I talked to Colonel Peterson about it. He thinks it's a great idea, says the military would support it. Robert, that's amazing, Jennifer said. But I don't know the first thing about starting a nonprofit or whatever this would be. I'm just a diner manager, and I'm just an old soldier, but maybe that's exactly what this needs. Not fancy people with degrees in social work, though we could definitely use some of those too. But at the core, just regular people who understand what it's like to struggle and want to help others do better. A nurse poked her head in. Robert, sorry to interrupt, but you have another visitor. Jennifer turned to see who it was and felt her breath catch. Standing in the doorway was her son Mike and her daughter Katie, and with them was Carol from the diner. Mom! Katie ran over and climbed into Jennifer's lap. Miss Carol said she'd bring us to surprise you. Did we surprise you? You definitely did, Jennifer said, hugging her daughter close. What are you two doing here? Mike walked over to Robert and, without any shyness at all, gave him a hug. We wanted to see Mr. Robert, and Mom, we have something to tell you. Carol stepped forward, smiling. The kids came to me at the diner today with an idea. I think you should hear it from them. Katie squirmed with excitement. Mom, Mike, and me, we were talking about Mr. Robert and about how nice everyone was to us. And we want to help too. Mike nodded seriously. We want to start a fundraiser at school. For veterans and for other kids whose moms or dads are working really hard. We can have a bake sale and a car wash and everything. Mrs. Chen, a new voice said. Jennifer looked up to see Danny, the young veteran from earlier, standing nearby with several other veterans. We couldn't help but overhear what Robert was saying about starting a program. We want to help too, whatever you need. More people started gathering. Other veterans, staff members from the facility, even some visitors who'd been in the common room. Word had spread quickly about Robert's idea, and people were responding. An older woman stepped forward. My name is Patricia. My husband was a Marine. He died 5 years ago, and I've been looking for a way to honor his memory. If you're serious about this, I can help. I used to run a nonprofit before I retired. I'm a lawyer, said a man in his 40s. I can help with the paperwork and legal structure. Pro bono, of course. I own a construction company, another person added. If you need a building or renovations, I'm in. Jennifer looked around at all these faces, all these people ready to help, and she felt that same overwhelming feeling from the parking lot ceremony. But this time it wasn't just about her or about Robert. This was about something bigger. Something that could actually make a real difference. Robert caught her eye and smiled. So what do you say, partner? Want to change the world with me? Jennifer looked at her kids, their faces bright with excitement. She looked at all these people willing to give their time and skills. She thought about how lost and alone she'd felt just a month ago, and how different everything was now. Yeah, she said, her voice strong and clear. Yeah, I do. Katie clapped her hands. We should call it something cool, like the Kindness Project. Or the Heroes Helping Heroes, Mike suggested. Robert laughed, a sound that was becoming more common every day. How about we all work on that together? Seems like we've got plenty of people with ideas now. As everyone started talking excitedly, sharing thoughts and making plans, Jennifer realized something profound. That night in the diner when she'd bought Robert a meal, she'd thought she was just feeding one hungry person. But really, she'd planted a seed, and that seed had grown into something beautiful and wild and unstoppable. The ripples just kept spreading, touching more and more lives, creating waves that reached far beyond anything she could have imagined. And this was only the beginning. 1 year later, Jennifer stood in front of a building that still didn't quite feel real. The old community center had been completely renovated, its fresh paint gleaming in the afternoon sun. A new sign hung above the entrance, the Bridge Home, connecting veterans and communities. It had been 12 months since that morning when military vehicles filled the diner parking lot. 12 months since her life changed completely. And now they were hosting the anniversary celebration and official grand opening of the organization she and Robert had built together. "Mom, they're here," Katie called out from the doorway. At 9 years old, she'd become the unofficial mascot of the Bridge Home, always volunteering to help stuff envelopes or sort donations after school. Jennifer smoothed down her dress and took a deep breath. Today was going to be big. The local news was coming, the mayor was speaking, and veterans from 3 surrounding counties had been invited. But more importantly, the families they'd helped over the past year would be here. Real people whose lives had been changed by what started as one simple act of kindness. Robert came walking up the sidewalk, and Jennifer smiled at the sight of him. He was wearing a suit today, his hair neatly trimmed, his posture straight and proud. The man who'd sat in that corner booth counting pennies was gone. In his place was someone who'd found his purpose again. "Ready for this?" he asked, offering her his arm. "As ready as I'll ever be," Jennifer said, linking her arm through his. "Did you see how many people are already inside?" "I did. Patricia said we're expecting over 200 guests. Can you believe that?" They walked into the building together, and Jennifer felt a surge of pride at what they'd created. The main hall had been transformed into a resource center. On one side, there were computers where veterans could search for jobs or file benefits claims with help from volunteers. On the other side, there were tables where families could meet with financial counselors, get help with resumes, or connect with local services. But the heart of the Bridge Home was something simpler. A large kitchen and dining area where every Tuesday and Thursday night, volunteers served free meals. It wasn't just about feeding people, though that was important. It was about creating community, about making sure nobody ate alone, about building connections between people who needed help and people who wanted to give it. Mike ran up to them, now 11 and somehow looking more grown up every day. "Mr. Robert, Mom, come see the photo wall. They just finished hanging it." They followed him to a corridor where dozens of photographs now lined the walls. Each one showed a success story, a veteran who'd found housing, a single parent who'd gotten a better job, families who'd been matched with volunteer mentors, kids who'd received school supplies or scholarships. Jennifer stopped in front of one particular photo. It showed a woman named Lisa and her 3 children. Lisa had come to the Bridge Home 6 months ago, recently divorced and working 3 part-time jobs just to afford a tiny apartment. The organization had helped her get job training, connected her with childcare assistants, and matched her with a veteran named Frank who'd started a small business and needed an office manager. Lisa now had a full-time job with benefits, and Frank had found a loyal employee who understood hard work and dedication. "That's my favorite one, too," Robert said quietly, standing beside her, "because it shows what we're really doing here. We're not just giving handouts. We're building bridges." Lisa helped Frank's business grow by 30%. Frank gave Lisa stability and a chance. Everybody wins. Colonel Peterson appeared in the crowd, now retired but still involved with the Bridge Home as a board member. "Jennifer, Robert, we're ready to start the ceremony whenever you are." They moved to the front of the main hall where a small stage had been set up. Jennifer looked out at the sea of faces, veterans young and old, families with children, volunteers who'd given countless hours, local business owners who'd donated money and supplies, reporters with cameras and notebooks. The mayor spoke first, talking about community values and civic responsibility. Then Patricia, who'd become the organization's executive director, shared statistics about their impact. In 1 year, the Bridge Home had served over 400 veterans and helped 230 families. They'd facilitated job placements, housing assistance, counseling services, and created mentorship programs that paired struggling single parents with retired veterans who had time and wisdom to share. But numbers didn't tell the whole story. Then it was Jennifer's turn to speak. She walked to the microphone, her heart pounding. Public speaking still terrified her, but she'd learned that sometimes you have to do things that scare you. A year ago, she began, her voice shaking slightly, I was barely surviving. I was exhausted, broke, and honestly felt pretty invisible. Like I was working as hard as I could, but nobody really saw me or cared. She found Katie and Mike in the crowd, their faces beaming with pride. I was doing everything for my kids, but I was scared it would never be enough. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Then one night, a man came into the diner where I worked. He was cold and hungry and apologizing for existing, and something in me just couldn't let him leave without helping. It wasn't heroic. I didn't think about it too much. I just did what felt right, her eyes found Robert. What I didn't know was that the man I helped that night was a genuine American hero who'd saved 17 lives in Vietnam. What I didn't know was that my small act of kindness would start a chain reaction that would change hundreds of lives, including my own. She had to stop and wipe her eyes. Even after a year, the emotion still overwhelmed her sometimes. But here's what I've learned. Every single person in this room has the power to change someone's life. You don't need money. You don't need to be special. You just need to see people, really see them, recognize their humanity, treat them with dignity even when they have nothing to offer you in return. The room was completely silent, everyone hanging on her words. The Bridge Home exists because people decided to see each other. Veterans decided to share their strength with struggling families. Single parents decided to give back by volunteering. Business owners decided to invest in their community. Kids decided to have bake sales and donate their allowance. She smiled at her children. Everyone found a way to build a bridge to someone else. Jennifer stepped back from the microphone and Robert stepped forward. His voice was strong and clear when he spoke. I was a ghost for a long time. I'd given up on life, on myself, on everything. I thought my service didn't matter anymore, that I didn't matter anymore. I was ready to just fade away. He looked at Jennifer with such gratitude it made her chest tight. And then someone showed me that I was wrong. Someone reminded me that every life has value, that every person deserves dignity, that it's never too late to matter again. Robert turned to address the crowd. A lot of people call Jennifer a hero. They say what she did was extraordinary, but I think what she did was actually very ordinary, or at least it should be. Seeing another human being who needs help and helping them, that should be ordinary. That should be what we all do. He gestured around the room. This place exists to make kindness ordinary again, to make connection normal. Build a community where people take care of each other not because it's unusual or special, but because that's just what we do. The crowd erupted in applause. People stood and the ovation went on for several minutes. Jennifer saw people crying, hugging each other, and she understood why. This wasn't just about an organization or a building. It was about hope. It was about the possibility that things could be different, that people could be better, that no one had to face their struggles alone. After the ceremony, during the reception, Jennifer found herself surrounded by people wanting to share their stories. A veteran named Thomas told her how the job placement program had helped him find work after he'd been unemployed for 2 years. A woman named Crystal explained how the mentorship program had given her the confidence to go back to school. A teenager named Alex said that seeing his mom get help from the Bridge Home had restored his faith in people. Each story was a ripple from that original moment in the diner. Each life touched was proof that kindness multiplied in ways that were impossible to predict. As the sun began to set and the celebration wound down, Jennifer found Robert sitting on a bench outside the building, looking peaceful and content. "Tired?" she asked, sitting beside him. "Good tired," he said. "The kind of tired you get from doing something meaningful." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as families left the building, children laughing and parents chatting with volunteers. "You know what the best part is?" Robert said. "It's that we're not needed anymore. I mean, we're still involved, but the organization runs itself now. Patricia and the other staff have it handled. The volunteers keep coming. The donations keep flowing in. It's become something bigger than either of us." Jennifer nodded. "That's exactly what it should be. We just lit the match. Everyone else built the fire. Do you ever think about that night?" Robert asked. "About how different things would be if you'd just brought me water and let me leave." "Sometimes," Jennifer admitted. "I think about how close we both were to giving up. You were literally at the end, and I was heading there too, just slower. And somehow we saved each other. Robert smiled. We did more than that. We showed people that saving each other is possible. That it's not only possible, it's necessary. A car pulled up and Carol got out waving at them. She'd come to pick up Jennifer and the kids. As Jennifer stood to go, Robert caught her hand. Thank you, he said simply. For everything. For seeing me when I was invisible. For giving me a reason to keep going. For building all of this with me. Thank you, Jennifer squeezed his hand. Thank you for letting me help. For showing me that kindness isn't weakness. For becoming family. For reminding me why any of this matters. As she walked to the car where her children waited, Jennifer looked back at the building one more time. The Bridge Home. A place built on the simple idea that everyone deserves dignity, that everyone has value, that kindness can change the world. It had started with an $18 meal. It had grown into something that had helped hundreds of people and would help thousands more, and all because two broken people decided to see each other's humanity and refused to look away. Jennifer climbed into the car, and Katie immediately started chattering about the cake they'd had at the reception. Mike was already making plans for the next fundraiser. Her life was so different now, stable, secure, filled with purpose. But the most important thing hadn't changed. She was still the same person who'd seen a hungry veteran and decided to help. She'd just learned that being that person could change everything. The car pulled away from the Bridge Home, but Jennifer knew she'd be back in a few days. There was always more work to do, always more people to help, always more bridges to build, and she wouldn't have it any other way.